So here's something I want to be honest about up front. Most videos about biblical foods for brain health usually focus on the same few things: olive oil, honey, fish, and yes, those are great foods. But they're only part of the picture. Because when you look closer at the biblical diet and compare it with what science is discovering about stroke and brain circulation, you find some surprising foods that rarely get talked about. Foods that ancient people ate regularly, without realizing how beneficial they might be. And some of them work even better in pairs. Combinations that turn out to be more powerful together than alone. So today, we're looking at 12 of them. Some single foods, some pairings, all rooted in the Bible and all backed by modern research. Let's get into it. And if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe. We do this every week. Number 1, black seed Nigella sativa. Okay, I want to start here because this is the one that, once you look into it, kind of stops you in your tracks. Black seed, Nigella sativa. Tiny, dark seeds that look almost like sesame seeds but aren't. It was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, traded throughout the ancient Middle East. In the Coptic Christian tradition, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, it appears as a medicinal food with deep roots in the region, embedded in the daily food culture of the world the biblical text emerged from. And for stroke and brain protection, the research on this seed is now quite serious. The primary active compound is thymoquinone, TQ, and TQ has been tested specifically in ischemic stroke models, which is the kind of stroke caused by a blocked artery cutting off blood to brain tissue. The results show it reduces oxidative damage to neurons during and after the ischemic event, reduces neuroinflammation, protects the blood-brain barrier from breaking down, which is one of the most destructive things that happens during a stroke, and reduces the actual volume of infarcted brain tissue. Those are significant findings. On the prevention side, TQ lowers blood pressure, reduces LDL oxidation, reduces platelet aggregation, and activates the NRF2 pathway, which is essentially the body's master antioxidant switch. Activating NRF2 upstream protects the entire cardiovascular and cerebrovascular system. How to use it? Take a teaspoon of black seed oil in warm water daily or mixed into food. Or you can grind whole black seeds and add to bread, soups, or yogurt. Daily, consistent use is where the real benefit builds. Number 2, the allium trio: onions, leeks, and shallots. Now this one is interesting because the Bible actually records the Israelites mourning these foods. In Numbers chapter 11, when they're in the wilderness, they cry out. They literally express grief for the onions, the leeks, and the garlic of Egypt. These were staple foods, central to the daily diet. And the specificity of the complaint tells you something about how much these vegetables were consumed. Of course, everyone knows about garlic, but the combo of onions and leeks don't get nearly the same attention. And the research on them for brain and vascular health is genuinely compelling. Onions contain quercetin, one of the most studied flavonoids in existence, and a whole range of organosulfur compounds. Korean researchers found that onion extract significantly reduced brain edema, swelling in brain tissue, after induced stroke in animal models. Edema is one of the most damaging secondary effects of stroke, often causing more long-term damage than the initial event. Onion compounds were reducing it measurably. Leeks contain camphorol at notably high levels, which protects endothelial cells from oxidative damage and inhibits foam cell formation, the early stage of atherosclerotic plaque. Leeks are also high in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds bacteria producing butyrate, which has documented neuroprotective effects in stroke models. How to use them? All three together in cooking, consistently. Slow-cooked onions, leeks in soups and stews, shallots in dressings. Daily allium intake, not just garlic, but the whole family, is where the cumulative protection adds up. Number 3, coriander seed and leaf, the bitter herb, coriander. And this one appears in Exodus, specifically as one of the bitter herbs eaten at Passover, and also in Numbers. where the Israelites describe manna as looking and tasting like coriander seed. So it was embedded in both the ritual and the daily food culture. And here's the thing about coriander that most people have no idea about. The research on its neuroprotective properties is now coming out of some serious institutions. A 2024 study from Mahidol University identified compounds in coriander, linalool, linylyl acetate, geranyl acetate, that protect neurons from oxidative stress-induced death, which is exactly the mechanism that causes permanent brain damage during a stroke. Coriander also lowers blood pressure through documented mechanisms, reduces blood sugar, and has heavy metal chelation properties, meaning it helps clear toxic metals from the blood that contribute to vascular damage over time. It also contains linoleic and linolenic acids, plant omega-3 fats, that support the structural integrity of brain cell membranes. The combo that ancient people didn't know they were making but were coriander with lemon or vinegar. Adding an acid source enhances the bioavailability of coriander's polyphenols, which is exactly how it was eaten at Passover, as a bitter herb with other acidic condiments. How to use it. Use fresh coriander leaf in food daily. Coriander seeds crushed and added to cooking. A simple coriander lemon dressing. Or you can make this combo, refrigerate it, and use when cooking. The whole plant is useful. Number 4, lentils with bitter herbs. Okay, so I mentioned this as a combo, and I want to explain the pairing specifically because this is one of the more interesting stories on this list. Lentils appear in the Bible multiple times. The most famous is the story of Esau trading his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew. And in Ezekiel, lentils are listed as an ingredient in the bread the prophet was instructed to make. They were a foundational food. Lentils are exceptional for stroke prevention, very high in folate, which regulates homocysteine. High homocysteine is a direct risk factor for stroke. It damages blood vessel walls, stiffens arteries, and makes clots more likely. Most people don't get nearly enough folate. But here's where the combo matters. Bitter herbs, parsley, endive, chicory, wild lettuce, contain sesquiterpene lactones that are anti-inflammatory and support liver function. The liver is central to both cholesterol regulation and homocysteine metabolism. Combined lentils, which provide folate to neutralize homocysteine, with bitter herbs that support the liver processing it, and you're hitting the same mechanism from 2 angles simultaneously. This is almost certainly not why ancient people combined these foods. But the biology works out remarkably well. How to use them. Cook lentil soup with a generous handful of fresh parsley, bitter greens stirred in. Simple, biblical, and biochemically thoughtful, as it turns out. Pause here for a second, drop a like if you're finding this useful, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever eaten any of these specifically because of the biblical connection, or just because of the health angle? I'm genuinely curious. All right, back to it. Number 5, wheat germ. From biblical grain, wheat appears throughout the Bible more than almost any other food. The grain offering, the bread of presence, Ezekiel's bread, the parable of the sower, wheat is everywhere. And when people in the ancient world ate wheat, they were eating whole grain. They weren't separating out the germ and the bran the way modern milling does. The germ, the embryo at the center of the wheat kernel, is where a remarkable concentration of nutrients lives. Vitamin E, B vitamins including B6 and folate, magnesium, zinc, and a compound called octacosanol that has been specifically studied for its effects on platelet aggregation and cerebral blood flow. Wheat germ oil has been tested in animal stroke models and shown to reduce hyperlipidemia-induced ischemic brain damage. It reduces the oxidative load on brain tissue and improves cerebral blood flow under conditions of high cholesterol. The vitamin E content specifically, tocotrienols and tocopherols, provides fat-soluble antioxidant protection to the myelin sheaths around neurons and to the lipid-rich cell membranes of brain tissue. Most people eating modern refined wheat get essentially none of this. The germ is removed in processing because it shortens shelf life. How to use it? Put raw wheat germ, a tablespoon daily on oatmeal, in smoothies, or stirred into yogurt. Store it in the fridge because the fats go rancid quickly at room temperature. Or use cold-pressed wheat germ oil as a finishing oil. Number 6, vinegar, fermented wine vinegar. And I know, vinegar doesn't exactly sound like a brain food. But stay with me, because this one is quietly extraordinary. Wine vinegar appears multiple times in the Bible. In Ruth chapter 2, Boaz invites Ruth to dip her bread in vinegar at mealtime. It was a condiment used daily. In Numbers, Nazarites were prohibited from drinking vinegar as part of their vow of separation. The crucifixion accounts describe soldiers offering wine vinegar. It was present everywhere in daily ancient life. Fermented wine vinegar contains acetic acid and retains polyphenols from the original wine. Acetic acid specifically improves insulin sensitivity, reducing the blood sugar spikes after meals that, over years, damage blood vessel walls. One of the cleanest mechanisms for long-term vascular protection. The combo: vinegar with bitter herbs on bread or legumes. The acid enhances the bioavailability of polyphenols in the herbs, particularly quercetin and kaempferol, and improves mineral absorption from the accompanying food. How to use it: a tablespoon of raw apple cider or wine vinegar in water before meals. You can make vinaigrette dressings with bitter greens and eat them. The classic Mediterranean practice of dipping bread in vinegar is actually remarkably well supported biochemically. Number 7, pomegranate rind tea, the forgotten part. Everyone knows pomegranate is good for you, so I'm not going to tell you pomegranate is on this list. What I am going to tell you about is the part of the pomegranate that nobody ever talks about and that the ancient world used extensively: the rind. Pomegranate is listed in Deuteronomy as one of the 7 fruits of the Promised Land. In ancient Middle Eastern medicine, the rind was used medicinally, not just the seeds. The rind contains punicolin and punicologen at concentrations far higher than the arils, the seeds. Punicologen is one of the most potent antioxidants identified in any plant material. It's been shown to reverse arterial plaque in some studies. But specifically relevant here, punicolin from pomegranate rind has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and directly protect neurons from ischemic damage. There's also ellagic acid in the rind, which converts in the gut to urolithins, compounds that reduce the microglial activation, driving chronic brain inflammation. Chronic microglial activation is now understood as a major driver of small vessel damage that builds lacunar, stroke risk over years. How to use it: dry the rind of a pomegranate in a low oven. Grind it to powder. Add half a teaspoon to hot water as a tea. Not glamorous, not delicious, but genuinely potent. You can also find pomegranate peel powder as a supplement. Number 8, spikenard nard with olive oil. Okay, this one is unusual. Spikenard nard appears in the Song of Solomon and is the expensive ointment that Mary uses to anoint Jesus in the Gospel of John. It was used both aromatically and medicinally in the ancient world. It was traded from the Himalayas to the Middle East at enormous expense. Its presence in the biblical text signals both its rarity and its perceived importance. Spikenard, Nardostachys jadamonsi, contains compounds including jadamonzone and nardosinone that reduce platelet aggregation, lower blood pressure, and have neuroprotective effects through multiple mechanisms. Animal studies show it reduces brain infarction size after induced ischemia. The combination with olive oil matters here. The bioactive compounds in spikenard are fat-soluble. They need a lipid carrier for proper absorption and tissue distribution, which is why in traditional use across multiple ancient cultures, aromatic medicinal plants were almost always combined with an oil. The instinct to mix spikenard with olive oil wasn't arbitrary. The lipid vehicle was functionally necessary. How to use it: a drop of spikenard essential oil in a tablespoon of olive oil, consumed with food, or dried spikenard root steeped in warm olive oil as a medicinal infused oil. 9. Barley with fermented foods. This one's interesting because it predates wheat as the dominant grain in the ancient Middle East. It was the grain of the poor, cheaper, hardier, more drought-resistant. And in the biblical text, it shows up consistently. Boaz's fields in Ruth were barley fields. The loaves Jesus multiplied in the feeding of the 5,000 were barley loaves. It was the everyday grain. And for stroke prevention, barley has a specific property that wheat and most other grains don't. It's exceptionally high in beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that is among the most studied nutrients for LDL cholesterol reduction. Beta-glucan works by forming a gel in the digestive tract that binds bile acids and removes them, forcing the liver to convert more cholesterol into new bile. The FDA has approved a heart health claim for barley beta-glucan specifically because the evidence is so consistent. High LDL, particularly oxidized LDL, is one of the primary drivers of atherosclerotic plaque, the upstream cause of most ischemic strokes. Not dramatic, profoundly effective long-term. The combo, barley with naturally fermented foods, fermented milk, vegetables, or naturally leavened bread. Fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids, including butyrate, which has documented neuroprotective effects in stroke models. How to use it? Whole barley grain cooked as a porridge or added to soups. Barley water, simmered barley strained off as a daily drink, paired with naturally fermented foods at the same meal. Last three, and these are the ones I think are the most underappreciated on the entire list. Still here? Drop a comment. I do read them. Number 10, caperberries. So, caperberries. And I genuinely love this one because almost nobody has ever considered it from a health perspective. In Ecclesiastes 12, a chapter about aging and the deterioration of the body, there's a phrase that Hebrew scholars have translated as the caperberry shall fail. It's part of a poetic passage about the body losing its vitality in old age. And specifically, traditional commentary has interpreted this as a reference to the failure of appetite, the fading of desire, the dulling of sensation that comes with age. The caperberry was understood in the ancient world as a stimulant, something that revived appetite, improved circulation, and supported vitality. And the biochemistry bears this out in interesting ways. Caperberries contain rutin, quercetin-3 rutinoside, at notably high concentrations. Rutin is now one of the more studied compounds for cerebrovascular protection specifically. Rutin strengthens capillary walls, inhibits the enzyme PDI, which promotes clot formation, improves cerebral microcirculation, and has protective effects against small vessel disease, the kind that causes lacunar strokes and vascular dementia. There's active pharmaceutical research on rutin, specifically for stroke prevention. Caperberries are one of the richest natural sources of it. How to use them? Use caperberries in salads with fish with eggs. The caper plant grows wild around the Mediterranean and has grown there since ancient times. A few caperberries daily is an easy habit to build. Number 11, bitter gourd and bitter greens. Daniel's diet. In Daniel chapter 1, Daniel and his companions refuse the king's food and eat only vegetables and water for 10 days, appearing healthier than everyone else at the end of it. Scholars examining what those vegetables would have been in a Babylonian context point consistently to bitter greens, things like endive, chicory, dandelion, wild lettuce, the kind of intensely bitter, dark leafy plants that were eaten throughout the ancient Middle East. Bitter greens are, plant for plant, among the most nutrient-dense foods in existence. Extraordinarily high in vitamin K, which plays a direct role in preventing arterial calcification, one of the key mechanisms that stiffens arteries and raises stroke risk as we age. Vitamin K activates matrix GLA protein, which specifically prevents calcium from depositing in arterial walls. Most people are chronically low in it, particularly the K2 form. Bitter greens are also high in folate, lutein, and dietary nitrates that the body converts to nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessels, improves endothelial function, and reduces blood pressure. And the bitterness itself matters. Bitter compounds, sesquiterpene lactones in chicory and endive, taraxacin in dandelion, stimulate bile production and liver function, which directly impacts cholesterol metabolism and the clearance of inflammatory compounds from the blood. How to use them. Put dandelion greens in salads. Also, so chicory and endive can be braised or taken raw. Bitter gourd cooked into soups or stir fries. If the bitterness is too strong at first, pair them with acid and fat, which is exactly how they've traditionally been dressed. And the palatability improves while the bioavailability of their fat-soluble vitamins goes up simultaneously. Number 12, walnuts. And we end with walnuts. The one powerful food God specifically handcrafted for the brain. You see, there's something almost poetic about this one. A walnut, when you crack it open, looks like a tiny brain. 2 hemispheres, wrinkled surface, bilateral structure. And it turns out that's not entirely coincidental from a functional standpoint, because walnuts are genuinely one of the best foods for brain and vascular health identified in modern nutritional research. Walnuts are the only common nut with significant alpha-linolenic acid, the plant form of omega-3. They're also high in elagitannins, which the gut converts to urolithins, compounds with powerful anti-inflammatory effects in vascular tissue. And they contain a specific form of vitamin E called gamma-tocopherol that's not found in most other foods and has particularly strong anti-inflammatory properties compared to the alpha-tocopherol form in almonds. The WAHA trial, a 2-year clinical study on walnuts and brain aging, found that daily walnut consumption reduced inflammatory markers in the blood, improved several measures of cognitive function, and reduced LDL cholesterol significantly. For stroke specifically, the combination of omega-3s, polyphenols, and the specific antioxidant profile of walnuts targets multiple risk pathways simultaneously. How to use them. About 7 to 8 whole walnuts daily, raw. Add to oatmeal or salads, or just eat them straight. 0 preparation, genuinely good. And that is it. 12 anti-stroke superfoods from a text thousands of years old. And what strikes me every time I do this kind of research is how much was already known. Not in biochemical language, but through careful observation across generations of watching what kept people well. The stroke picture is so much about what happens quietly over decades. Slow arterial stiffening, gradual inflammation, accumulated damage to small blood vessels that nobody notices until something breaks. The foods we talked about today work at exactly that level. Long-term, consistent daily habits that change the trajectory. Pick 1 or 2 that are genuinely new to you, or use all of them rotationally in your daily meals. Add them to your daily life for 30 days and pay attention. That's all. The rest tends to follow. Subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment. Which one on this list genuinely surprised you? I read all of them. See you in the next one.